So you're here at the Managing Your Collaboration System session. These sessions are presented by the IMCCA. The IMCCA organization is an organization made up of vendors and users. It's free to users to join. And our goal is really trying to educate and bridge the gap between the vendor community and the user community and try and educate folks. We've been managing all the sessions this week related to collaboration. And for the most part, they've been pretty well attended, but maybe not for this one. My name is Mike Brandofino. I'm the current chairperson of the IMCCA, but I also have a particular interest in this session. I was the CTO and founder of a company called Glowpoint, which was really one of the first managed service providers for video over IP. And so this, really falls in line with what I've done, but it's changed quite a bit, and we'll talk about that as we go through the session. Unified Communications, has been a great communication tool. It's got all these different facets to it. It's so much more than just, voice, video, and data. It's presence, it's, file sharing, it's calendaring, scheduling, it's all these components. But with all these components, it creates potential complexity. And, we still have customers, having meetings that don't work or not being able to be connected. And it's amazing because if you sat in sessions like this 10 years ago, we would say, well, we're getting there and collaboration is getting to the point where interoperability works and it's easy to do and it's one click and, and we're still in a situation where this stuff happens. Why? Because there's more stuff happening on networks, there's more complexity, the new dynamics of a workforce are changing all of the devices that are connected to the network. It just makes it more difficult to manage. So when you think about deploying a UC strategy, most companies, I think, tend to forget about what the support ramifications are going to be. What it's going to be like to support those users. We used to do a lot of call launching because people would walk into the room and wouldn't want to touch that remote control, or the IT guys didn't want them to touch the remote control. And so you tried to launch those calls and launch those meetings for folks. We've now moved to much more of an ad hoc environment, so how does the support change for that? You have mobility as a factor. How does that change the support? So if you don't include support as part of your strategy, you might have significant issues. Day two is problem one. I used to own a consulting company, and I would tell my guys, you could work all weekend till 3 o'clock in the morning, but if on Monday morning one thing doesn't work, you didn't complete the job successfully. Well, same thing with these. If you spend months deploying a UC strategy, rolling out, training people, educating everyone, and then on day one or day two, people are having problems with performance or issues or connectivity, you're going to be really questioned as to whether or not you've deployed it effectively. There's also the challenge now of software versus hardware. We've gone to a virtualized environment. Many of the tools that used to be big hardware devices in your computer closet or point of presence is now software on a virtual server or on your laptop or PC or mobile device. So what is the challenge there? We had a customer when I was AVI-SPL saying, I want to roll out Jabber to 14,000 users. And we said, well, your hardware can't support it. Your network can't support it. Your infrastructure to scale would be $12 million just to get the infrastructure in shape. Suddenly they didn't, deploy it to 14,000 users. So hardware versus software are things that you need to consider from a managed services perspective as well. And then metrics are huge today. Most people are trying to figure out, all right, I invested in this infrastructure, am I getting use out of it? It's not even about an ROI anymore. It's more about, are they utilizing it effectively? Are people leveraging the tools that we installed? And maybe there's a training issue associated with that or an adoption issue. So the ability to look at data is important from a managed services perspective. And then it's a matter of what the platform is. You know, if you go walk down the aisle of the trade show, you'll see many manufacturers, you know, who have different devices, different AV components, and they're all starting to have, you know, some kind of platform to manage their environment. But the question is that good enough? Do you have a homogeneous environment that you could just use one tool to manage your environment, or do you need to be able to manage multiple pieces of hardware? And so what are your options there? You know, are you just looking at whether or not a device is dead or alive, or are you trying to get more information out of that? Is the projector lamp, you know, near its useful life and needs to be replaced? Is a device overheating in a room? Is there significant data loss or packet loss from the Ethernet port of a device that's connected to the network? So these are things that these management tools need to be able to support, and there's a decision to be made about what ones to go after. And then, of course, there's managed services. And it means different things to different people, and it's one of the questions for the panel a little bit later. And you know, there's always a question, do I build a service organization internally to do this, or do I use a service provider? If I use a service provider, do I hire them to have people on site? Do I allow them to come in through my network and manage my devices? Is it a cloud service? Is it on-prem? Is it my equipment? Is their equipment? So managed services offers, you know, more questions than answers, and it really behooves an organization as they develop their strategy to look at those options as well, to make sure that it meets their organization's needs. And then, boy, I was on a panel this morning talking about security in the AV space, and you know, we're susceptible now that all these AV components are connected to the network. We need to worry about this. We need to worry about someone connecting a device in a room to do a display content, and is that going to introduce something else into the network? You know, one of the interesting things that we see as well is, you know, customers deploy, you know, equipment across a number of rooms, and they keep the same default password for everyone because it's easier when they go and work on it. You know, are you doing the right thing? Are you patching things effectively? Managed services extends well beyond now just, you know, getting a meeting up and running. It's taking care of that infrastructure over the long haul and making sure that things are done to protect it going forward, especially now because of all the viruses and malware that we have going on. So, you know, in summary, when you're talking about UC and supporting it, you really need to think about what your user community is doing, what parts of UC they're using, how your network is set up, what management tools you're going to use. Are you a homogeneous environment? Do you have a heterogeneous environment where you have many different products? Can you support it on your own, or do you need other resources? And really work on what those cost differences are. And I think a lot of people miss the point of total cost of ownership. The cost of ownership of a UC implementation is not just the software licenses or the hardware, it's the cost of supporting that. And you need to work that into your calculation and ongoing budget. And you need to be able to protect your company and keep those platforms current. If you can't do that internally, you need to figure out ways or work with companies that can actually do that for you. And it's at a point now where that's protecting your company and its data from potentially malicious activity. So that sets the tone for the topic. And what I'm going to do is just have each of the board members introduce themselves and a little bit about what they do, and then we'll go ahead with some questions, and of course, we'll leave time for questions from the audience as well. So.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Babe. I'm with Polycom's Global Services, and I've been with Polycom 15 years. Started in field services, professional services, and been involved in our managed service business as well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Stewart, and I'm Director of UCC Engineering for AVI-SPL. I've been in the industry now for about 13 years. Started off and lived most of that life in the first 10 years working in managed services. And I've taken that experience now into AVI-SPL, where I help design managed service solutions and UC solutions for customers.
Yeah, Greg, good morning. My name is Ken Scaturro. I'm the VP of Sales of the Americas for Condeco Software. We have a platform that helps optimize your resources, whether it's your real estate resources or your collaboration resources. I don't think I have to repeat that, do I? No, good. I've been in the managed services industry for about 10 years when Mike and I used to go head to head together back in the day. And before that, working for some global systems integrators doing worldwide network management. So it's an interesting topic to me. So I appreciate your time today.
Great, guys. Thanks for being on the panel. So the first topic, and since we have such a small panel, will everybody just kind of go through and answer it. You know, managed services used to mean call launching. And in fact, you know, we bought a company at AVI-SPL called Informata, and that was what the Symphony software did, right? And now it's changed. And so what does it mean today? What does managed services mean in the UCC space? Just go down the line.
Managed services in the UCC space has evolved from, like Mike mentioned, was initially launching calls to taking ownership of the various IT support functions throughout the service lifecycle.
Now I'm going to talk a little bit. And talk a little bit about, it's not a commercial, but talk a little bit about how Symphony has changed from when we started and what it's like now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when Symphony first started as a concept, it was really scheduling and call launching. Now we had to communicate with the endpoints, we had to communicate with the infrastructure, but there wasn't a lot of meat behind that. We were launching calls, and then it started to build a little bit more. We had to know a little bit more in regards to, is there packet loss, is there degradation, what do we do when a device disconnects during its scheduled time, and we're really evolving past that point now because the many meeting solutions now are either ad hoc or they follow specialized meeting flows like Skype for Business or Cisco Spark, where they have a very specific user flow, and it's now one button push or some flavor of that. So now the real value to managed services is maintaining the configurations, maintaining the status, doing software updates, doing patching, maintaining security, but then still knowing what's going on in a individual call, because many software codecs at this point, if you would call your IT for support, they say, well, reboot the computer, and that's not good enough, especially at the high level, CEO level meetings. We need to have intelligence to know how to fix that and intercept that issue before it becomes critical.
Yeah, I look at it a little differently. I think our industry here, the collaboration industry, is a little myopic in their definitions of managed services. If you, in parallel, looked at the IT industry going back 3 or 4 years ago, the IT industry had service management down, and it was level 1 through level 7. They wanted to understand what was happening at the physical plant, right through to the application layer, and all of the pieces and parts of the service in between. So if something fell down along the way, you'd be able to determine whether it was an application or the actual physical plant, or even something in between. So I think we've evolved because our industry is really merged with the IT environment, that we are now looking at this from a total end-to-end management solution, right? To what John said, right? What's going on in the network? Is there packet loss? Is there jabber? Is there, what's really going on in that infrastructure? How is that affecting the endpoints? How is it affecting the infrastructure? And then gathering the metrics through that.
So I was on a session this morning, and an IT guy asked a question, and he basically coined, I think, a new great acronym. And what he said was, you know, we have to deal with bring your own freaking devices. So it's now BYOFD, and how that's impacting security. How is it impacting managed services from a UCC perspective? Anybody?
Yeah, so it's a major challenge for a few reasons. Many now collaboration solutions do support or rely on BYOD or PC-based. There are so many security implications where getting to the application layer is just not something that is feasible because of the high sensitivity nature of the data that's stored on those PCs. It's not like interacting with a codec where it has a very narrow swim lane and there's not sensitive data there. That's not the case now with many soft devices and BYOD. So it's a challenge. So now we have to look at more intelligence and analytics in the network that's powering this and the cloud infrastructure that is enabling the BYOD to function.
It's a good point, John, that the bring your own device is complicated by the transition to cloud or hybrid cloud with some on-prem or private hosted. And for most of the customers that we see, it's not a single platform and a single cloud solution or a single on-prem with one vendor solution. We're looking at hybrid multi-vendor solutions that may be a mix of cloud, hybrid cloud, on-prem. So that data path for your mobile devices is interacting with different UC services at different points in the network, and so network security becomes much more complicated. You need automation and analytics tools to help manage that, make it scalable.
Yeah, so what we're seeing, at least on the mobility side of bring your own device on your cell phone, is more and more corporations are going to the model of building their own app on their devices. So we have an app, I think Polycom has an app, most of the manufacturers have an app there. What they want us to do now is open up our APIs to those apps to allow their overall application to talk to us. So they're going to build the secure wrapper around the mobile app, and now we're just going to have to be a feed into that overall one organization's mobile application. So that's been more difficult, more challenging for us to do that in the time frame in which these organizations want to do it. That's one of the ways that they're trying to solve this problem.
I've been walking around the floor and talking to some different folks, and one of the topics coming up is what I'm calling proximity, but is essentially, walking into a room, it knows by my cell phone that I'm walking into the room, and now I can take control of what's in that room. Again, so it's mobility, but that whole concept of controls in the room, how does that impact managed services? Does that make it easier because customers are able to do things on their own, or does it make it more difficult because now you have more people able to kind of go in and muck stuff up?
Yes.
So we have to build, at least our approach is mobile first, because that's the user experience that at least our end users are demanding today. So we're building applications mobile first. We have to make sure, though, that we're integrated into Active Directory or whatever the rights management system is within that room. So if you walk into a room and you have the right rights, then you should be able to very simply launch that application within there. And at least that's the approach that we're taking, kind of Active Directory, single sign-on,
Sure.
and making sure that you have proper rights management.
I guess one other comment on the personalization aspect of walking into a room and having your mobile device, or being able to bring your calendar into that room and bring your recently called list just by walking in and knowing who you are. It's part of a larger focus within the industry the last 2 or 3 years on user experience as a differentiator between what had become commoditized with ports and the basic call flow. So how do you tailor that user experience to user groups within your business? Because what the engineering team wants to use might be more persistent messaging. The training department might be more into media streaming and playback. So each user group is going to have their own workflows. So designing and then monitoring and being able to set security baselines by user group, tailoring SNMP by user group, that's where it really becomes powerful to make it a user experience-based design and operations model.
So theoretically, all that would result in less calls to a help desk or a service provider. Is that really happening?
Yeah, in theory, yes, but they both brought up an important point, and that is now starting to be a differentiation between the people as an entity that you're inviting to a call and the devices, the room devices, because I can go in and I can pair to a codec. We have to make sure, I go to pair to that codec, there's somebody in my room squatting. It's a new concept. It's not something that is generally unknown for managed services, but it's something that's becoming more prevalent just because you really need to focus on the end user workflows on how you properly schedule a meeting. It's becoming more and more important, again, because of that separation between the codec and the room that is almost becoming more of a dumb terminal, and intelligence is on a mobile device, right, and telling it how to call, where to call, who to connect with. So it's becoming complicated.
Yeah, Mike, to your earlier point about your mobile app and walking around and what's available or not, we've built Bluetooth into our screens that sit outside the room, and those screens broadcast I'm available, so that if you're in a room and you're running out of time and you want to find the next closest room, then you can just very easily press a button and find the next available room. That being said, being on the floor, many people today said, hey, that's a great feature, you'll have to turn it off in our environment.
Yeah.
Speaking of the presence and how we bring that into user experience to drive adoption and consumption of the services, when you mentioned total cost of ownership, you really need to look at total cost of ownership as a cost per use. So whether you spent $1 million or $2 million, if nobody's using it, you're really not getting any ROI. So utilization and adoption becomes critical to the value that you're getting out of your managed service investment. Some of our VARs and MSPs have developed some tools to use the APIs to customize that. One example is using presence on Skype to push out some adoption videos when they're rolling out new features. When they can see your status is green, now might be a time to watch this 5-minute video. And
Nice.
They can see that and push out a quick link. And those are some of the innovative things that we're seeing some of the partner network developing to meet those needs.
So we're seeing a changing, from what I heard, seeing in the industry, we're seeing a changing dynamic for managed service in that you're not really providing, you're managing the equipment, but really the support is for the end users. And so are the models changing as well? We at GlowPoint used to charge, monthly fee per room. Now it's not only per room, there's multiple devices in the room. So is the model changing on a per user support basis in managed services, or is it still a room or equipment based model?
It's a little bit of a hybrid because there are really two challenges. It's monitoring, managing, and administrating the endpoints, infrastructure, and/or cloud. But then there's also providing that conference service, and what conference service means can really depend on the solution and the individual customer.
Any change with you guys on pricing as it relates to managed services tools and things?
Yeah, I see two different dynamics happening as a lot of the standard offers have become somewhat commoditized with public cloud offers. There's two directions that suppliers can take, and one is to go for automation and lower the price point, and then to find those differentiators to add additional value. So we're seeing a shift towards standard contract and standard pricing for the baseline commoditized, and then custom contracts for some of the high-touch features that would enable some, either whether it's custom SLA performance that you need to monitor, or if it's being able to provide additional granularity in your analytics by user group or service group.
Right. And so the other thing,
Mike, I'd just make just a quick comment. on
Yeah,
that.
sure.
Just for the way we're looking at our model, we used to charge a subscription per user related to mobile apps particularly on that. But the drive back from the community was we don't want to pay for mobile apps. If we want those free, I can go to the App Store and download those for free. So we've driven now to an unlimited consumption model as it relates to that.
Okay.
And now it's down to just you're paying for the resources that you have under management as opposed to the number of users that you have under management.
okay, interesting. So the other thing that, when you were managing and launching a call, you knew that call was happening, and you knew if something happened, you could react. Now it's ad hoc. You may not know that call is happening, and a customer calls in. What's happening? How are you able to quickly find, where they are, what they're doing, and what potentially is happening?
Well, yes, the monitoring the monitoring capabilities for the NOC and the Tier 1 or Tier 2 support teams becomes very important for them to be able to look at the network holistically and determine, is this issue a network issue versus a device issue versus a user issue, and pinpoint that. And one of the things that we've been developing to try to improve the ability for the managed service providers to use our resource management tool is to bring the audio devices in with the video devices under one provisioning server and one management tool, and also add better peripheral support. So if you have an eagle eye camera, or if you have a ceiling microphone or projector, how can you better monitor those? Are they disconnected? Can I tweak some SNMP traps so I can proactively see if there's no audio, it's because the microphone's unplugged. Meeting with one of our partners yesterday, they had developed their own tool for that, using some different API and SNMP traps. And it was very cool the way they could quickly see out of 600 video rooms, 3 that had a red flag because of something like a camera being unplugged or the system being unplugged or network performance not being within an SLA that was predefined. And they could jump right into those and remotely manage and remediate the issues.
So that leads into the tools, right? That you have to have the right tools in order to manage these environments.
Yeah, and what you're saying there is, you know, in the old way of doing business, we were doing application level monitoring.
Yeah.
And I think what Jeff is talking about now is driving in and looking at all the other layers and making decisions. I don't care if it's ad hoc or not. If there's a router down somewhere, I need to know it because I need to know downstream what that router is affecting across my infrastructure, just not from my collaboration side.
Yeah, and that's where there is a challenge and a need that's now evolving for API level access to core and especially the cloud at this point in time. Not to pick on one particular solution at this point, but Cisco Spark, and this is changing, but at this point in time, you register your device Cisco Spark, you cannot manage the endpoint. You cannot monitor the endpoint. You have no data sets other than what's available in the Spark cloud. Now, Cisco is remediating that, and they are making advances to allow that to happen again, but right now it's a little bit of a vacuum. It's a challenge for a managed service provider to convert somebody to something like Spark when you don't have the full access that we're used to.
So that comes to the point of, you know, the solution that you're picking. If you don't think about the support, you may end up in a situation where you can't support the environment that you deployed. And depending on the scale of that deployment, that can be very impactful.
Yes.
Definitely. So that leads to another question, which is homogeneous versus heterogeneous environments. And, you know, are some of the tools becoming less manufacturer focused, and are they opening up to be able to support things beyond their own products? First, I have to ask you guys.
We see very few true homogeneous environments, to be honest, and that's for a number of different reasons. You have management changes within an IT organization that will change their supplier strategy. You have merger and acquisitions that bring in equipment, maybe legacy equipment, and you also have the need to support peripheral devices that may not be part of your OEM for your unified UC solution. So trying to make that a unified experience and have a unified platform and view into all of those different devices and API sets, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And, you know, in addition, as much as we would love for our organization to be able to stand up and say, this is the standard we're going to deploy globally, it just doesn't happen. Individual business units find a solution that fits their individual needs. They have the authority to spend that budget, and they may have their own solution in a subset or in a region. And while some of the manufacturer solutions are certainly getting better at the scheduling aspect, being able to provide the one button to push or the equivalent to that, one touch or whatever the term you want to use, there's still some struggles in terms of managing those devices, in terms of software updates and maintaining configurations. It's still a challenge in a multi-tenant environment. And so there's some adaptations that are going on there, but frankly, there's some manual intervention that needs to happen. Whereas if it was a homogeneous environment, you could push a button and all your software builds. But you know, it's a challenge, not just for managed service providers, but for those that are doing it in-house as well.
Yeah, we as manufacturers have to provide open RESTful APIs and allow our integrator partners and end user customers to develop to those APIs. There's best of breed products out there that people just want to bring into those environments, and you have to be able to support that type of infrastructure. We write to the Polycom APIs, and in this area of chaos, right? There's opportunity. There's companies that are making a living just writing the connectors in the APIs so that they can have one button to push across the Ciscos and the Polycoms and the Pexams and the rest of those folks out there. So it's our challenge to bear, if you will, that we as an industry have to continue to provide the open APIs. I think that's how we're going to solve it.
I just want to agree with that and kind of emphasize that it's not the unified hardware behind the curtain that's important to the business and to the end users. It's unified user interface, a unified workflow, so that I don't have to stop my workflow to go over and use another communication tool. That it's consistent whether it's a multi-vendor heterogeneous environment, and that creates a great opportunity for managed service providers to fill that gap.
So UC is now so intertwined. Meeting rooms used to be islands unto themselves, and IT organization didn't care about them because they couldn't connect out. Now everything's connected. And it's so dependent, UC's performance is so dependent on the network. How does a managed service, offerings tool, blend with monitoring? Because Ken said you need to know if the router's down. Well, the router you don't own, the IT organization owns that. So how is that happening? And are these tools now going deeper into the network environment? And is the IT organization accepting that kind of gathering of data on their network?
Right, so that, in my experience, depends on how open the IT organization is to having additional eyes to look under the hood, if you will. But in many cases, we've still found that there's resistance there. So an approach that we're seeing and that we're taking today is that we're integrating with the customer's ticketing systems, whether that's Remedy, whether that's Salesforce, or another internal system that is connected to the customer's existing network monitoring platform, so that we can correlate issues that we're seeing on the meeting level with issues that the customer's IT organization is seeing at the router switch packet level. So doing that, going back to RESTful APIs and being able to do integrations is helping us bridge that gap.
Yeah, there's a challenge there, Mike, in the managed service space, particularly when you look at a large global organization which may have two outsourced redundant network service providers. And then we sit on top of that in the managed service capacity trying to manage video or the collaboration space. Those network providers absolutely do not provide visibility into what's going on here. So you've got kind of it goes into the magic box, it comes out of the magic box problem. So there's some challenges there, but there's tools out there. I know managed service providers, AVI-SPL and others are looking at tools like scientific logic that drives down into those particulars, and it allows you to map the path in which a video call is up on, and then allows you to monitor across that video call. There's metric gathering tools like Splunk. Splunk's a great tool out there that allows you to input data from multiple sources, and then allows you to do the analytics against that engine and start to see that, I do see the network traffic Mondays at 8 a.m. start to spike to 85%. So do I need to get with that network team and try to design a better infrastructure or work an alternate path to support that?
Beyond network performance, there's also change management. And so when you don't have a close partnership with the network service provider, whether it's an in-house network engineering team or outsourced, and you're responsible for meeting SLAs on the managed services side of the video and UC infrastructure and devices, a lot of customers are asking for ITIL-based change control processes with the change advisory board and change approval flow for anything you want to touch in the video network. But as a managed service provider, if you don't see changes that happen in the network because you're not on the change advisory board, and you're not privy to discussions about router upgrades or firewall changes, then it's really hard to manage. And it just takes engagement and commitment from both ends. The customer has to be committed to working with you and sharing that information. If they're not open to letting you put probes and integrate like iSinga or whatever tool you're using to monitor with their network tools, then they really have to have a dialogue and kind of a partnership process with you.
So how is that with all the security concerns these days? How are the IT organizations handling some third-party organization looking into, and if you have to remotely control it, you need access into their network. Is that a problem, or are they starting to get more comfortable with that?
I'd say it's a mixed bag. I've worked with some recent organizations where they said, yeah, here's read-only SNMP access to the routers and switches that the video network runs on. And I've had others say, no way, no how, you're not touching it. And I've had others that say, hey, yep, put your synthetic testing tools on, put your network monitoring probes in, and let's work together to provide a better experience. It's really a mixed bag.
Yes, I agree with John on that when we see it out there. I will tell you though, 2 or 3 years ago, at least in our company, when we got security questionnaires, it'd be 5 or 10 questions, maybe 15. We're getting hundreds to 200 questions on how we're supporting security across the platform. So it's delaying the sales process. There's a whole nother step with it. And if you're trying to get a piece of business done within your organization and managing a project within your organization, if you're not engaging security earlier, you're missing an ability to accelerate the cycle of what you're doing.
And when you start working with federal accounts and healthcare accounts with HIPAA compliance, it just puts all of the security concerns into
Yeah, or you go international and you're dealing with safe harbors in the EU. I mean, it becomes a real mess.
So managed service providers need to have a dedicated security team that focuses on
Absolutely.
So how is the new European law for the privacy going to impact the ability to deliver managed services? You know, with we had to deal with it in Germany for a long time, where you couldn't have data across the border. How are you going to how are managed service providers going to be able to deal with that?
Well, I can give a quick example. You know, we've seen managed service providers, including our services, wanting to have geographic presence and data centers in that theater. But there's also requirements for NATO membership if you're working with federal accounts, that you're not putting, for example, into a location that might be in theater for EMEA or APAC region, but if it's a non-NATO country, then you're shutting off a whole segment of business that you can't support their data.
Right.
Yeah, it's becoming complex. One of the things we've done, not in the EU specifically, but for Canada, we had a subscription VMware service, and we had to stand that up completely standalone, and it only services Canadian customers. That way that we can qualify to work with Canadian governments that have those similar regulations, that data stay within the borders of the country.
Same, I have nothing to add. It's a challenge. We're trying to work around it.
Yeah. So the other thing we've been touching on it a little bit is metrics and analytics related to UCC usage. And it's interesting, I have my brother is at Ernst & Young, and they deployed Office 365. And you know, one of the things he was complaining about is, well, we have no idea people are using, you know, Office 365 phone services more than the historical Cisco stuff, because they want to figure out when they need to transition off, and they just don't have the data to be able to do that. So is that getting better? Is the ability to provide metrics and reporting to customers on the utilization of the UC tools, and how deep does it go? Can you say, you know, people are using, you know, Skype for Business, or they're using, you know, texting, or they're using Presence? How deep can you go with those metrics, and is it getting better?
I'd answer by saying yes, it is getting better. Right? There's a collection of data, but that's only part of it. You've got to collect the data, you have to analyze the data, you have to pull the intelligence out of the data, and then you have to have an action associated with that. So I don't think that full process is fully there. Okay. I just think there's a lot of gathering. Yes, we can collect it. Yes, we can collect it. Yes, we can collect it. But what is the actionable item that you're getting at? I think that's what I'm lacking.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that you pretty much stole my thunder there. That was my response. So, but yeah, just to reiterate, yes, we're absolutely getting more and more data points. It's a matter of turning that into intelligible data that we can, again, find actions on and make that valuable. And that's becoming a bit of a business in and of itself right now.
Sure.
And that's the good news. I think the good news is there's a process. We've got the data now. Right? And at least it's a start.
So we've got it. The technology has enabled better means to automate and collect and sort and present that in dashboard views. We developed a tool 18 months ago called Real Access. We've made it available to partners. Partners have developed their own, so the portals are out there. But from my experience, having a portal with access to data does not drive any action or behavior unless IT leadership really commits to time and makes it a priority to sit down on a quarterly basis, and not just 15, 30 minutes, to really sit down and understand where are we performing and meeting our you know, utilization and consumption of services, where are we not, and what do we do about that? So it's really, I guess, a business decision.
Sure.
That they have to prioritize that.
Interesting side note, I've been getting involved in more governance, risk, compliance projects. You know, you talked about ITEL before, but there's now this tie-in. So not only do you need to have the processes, but you need to have the data to support that and the analytics to report on whether or not you're addressing your risks, you're utilizing the tools that you're supposed to be using, because UC tools can be part of the process for compliance. So data is definitely becoming an important thing. The last question before I open up to questions from the audience is, so with all these changes and all the challenges, Is there still a build versus buy model that makes sense for customers? I mean, is there a threshold size of the organization where this gets to be too much for an organization, or are people able to do this internally and just put all these tools together and support UC adequately on their own?
I'll comment on, at least from my perspective, is I see more and more organizations want to focus on their core competency, whether that's building cars, developing drugs, doing financial analysis, and they want to get out of the business of supporting hardware, software, and the rest of it, which means that there's a massive drive to the cloud, there's a massive drive to services, there's a massive drive to outsourcing. And the manufacturer vendor world is supporting that. The reality is, for us, we charge more for on-prem solutions than we do off-prem.
Interesting, yeah.
Because for us, right, we're an agile development model. We put releases out every 2 weeks within there, and in order to support those on-prems, we're never going to be able to have that happen. And a lot of other resources that are associated with that. So I think based on those things, I think the buy model has become and continues to become more prevalent.
Yeah, and I'd say, if anything, the threshold for do I do it myself versus do I outsource is getting lower and lower. This connected world is opening us up to meeting around the clock. Very much smaller organizations are now going global, and it's very hard to cost justify having the right smart people on site doing it in-house, available 24/7. Where you can, for not an unreasonable subscription fee, have the power of an entire managed service to do that for you.
I think the other thing that is really driving that change is where cloud as a service means managed services, and customers now have a low barrier to entry, low barrier to exit. They're looking for outcome-based services that are bundled with a monthly subscription. It might include the room devices, and it shifts a lot of risk, and it shifts a lot of new responsibilities on the supplier to meet those needs and be competitive.
Sure. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Are there any questions from the audience? No. Come on, Dan.
Okay. So, you guys see a trend towards large organizations doing what they're doing, the management of these systems internally or outsourced?
Yeah, I think that was what we were just talking about. I think it's driving it to outsourcing.
And even not just outsourcing for remotely managed or hosted managed, there's been growth in on-site managed services, which we used to call resident engineers or resident techs, but that has become more of sometimes a hybrid model, where we've got a hosted managed service for core infrastructure and tier 2, tier 3 level support, with some on-site resident techs that they'll bundle under one agreement for on-site and remote managed services, one price per month, one set of SLAs, one point of contact, and it gets that out of their operations and into our core competency.
Yeah, I'd agree with that fully, especially in the world where video as becoming a full-fledged part of UC is absolutely mission critical today. So in order to meet some of those SLAs, it really is a hybrid deployment where we have remote service techs that are there, but if something happens, we need feet on the street immediately. And really the best way to do that in a lot of ways is by having some form of on-site bodies to augment the remote managed service.
You're also seeing, and I'm not with an AV integrator anymore, right? So I'm looking at it from the outside, so to speak. But what I'm sensing, and in talking to customers in some different capacity that I'm in now, the IT organizations are just so overwhelmed with the projects that they have and managing their piece of the pie. And even though UC and meeting rooms have fallen into kind of their responsibility to support, I think they're looking for partners that can do it for them. And what Ken said before, I'll go back to when I was at AVI-SPL. Dow Chemical was one of our customers, and their philosophy was our employees are either doctors, scientists, or engineers. So we don't want to have video engineers or anything, so that they wanted to outsource all that. And I think a lot of companies are going down that path. And it was interesting what you said about that threshold is coming down too. I think because of cloud, I think because there's no need to invest in the infrastructure, maybe that hurts some folks and have to change their model a little bit, but now the barrier to entry of getting these tools is lower, but that support need is still there. So organizations, I think, are spending that money on the outsourced support model, and it's more, companies can afford that at a lower level. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think it was Jeff, I think, that talked about outcome-based consumption models or subscription models, and a couple of questions around that. Are there metrics associated with the fees, right? So if I improve my SLA, am I going to be, or if I, as a managed service delivery partner, if I'm exceeding my SLAs, am I earning more, right? If I'm delivering higher uptime. So that was one question. And then the other one is, you said that they're considering hardware device and endpoints and root content, which we're hearing in the industry, AV as a service as a new term, infrastructure as a service. We're seeing Wi-Fi as a service now. $20 a whack a month, right? So, what are you seeing from that perspective on the AV as a service side? Is there real demand? Is that something that is maturing?
Sure, we're in a transformation, and that means there's also some growing pains that go along with that. A couple of examples where Polycom has had to change, as Mike mentioned, our core business was shipping infrastructure and video codecs, and as the technology has changed, we've realigned our partnership with more open source compatibility to integrate with Office 365 or Google Apps for Business or Zoom. We just recently announced a new partnership. So in that hybrid model, having that single set of SLA metrics and having one bundled offer with the outcome-based service, it's not something that I think Polycom, we weren't born in the cloud, so we weren't first to market with a customer success program that was not trying to monetize the adoption and reporting and some of the other client support services that it takes to deliver those type of outcome-based models. And if you try to monetize those offers, the marketplace is really rejecting that because they can get, the apps are for free, and so how do you drive consumption? Well, there's a value to the supplier equally as there is to the customer. So more and more businesses are baking that into the cost of subscription to provide those type of analytics and consulting reports to drive utilization and drive renewals. It's a transition period for sure.
I mean, I'll tell you that on the first part, there's certainly a negative ramification of SLAs. There's a lot of teeth in those. The only time I've seen the positive is if you have a situation you're coming into where the customer's environment is so bad, and to get them to believe that managed services is the way to go, you might come in at a lower rate, get it started, and it's going to go to a higher rate as you increase the level of service, or you create levels of service, and then as they have more users in a certain pool, it goes up, and so it's performance-based to some degree, but generally, there's so much competition out there that it's hard to say we're going to charge you more for. You got to be 99.99 kind of thing.
And I want to make sure I answered your question. I guess part of the change is it's less support-focused metrics on uptime and more shifting towards utilization levels, because is that really what's measuring the value of your investment if you had 99.9% or 99.7% uptime, but you're only doing half the calls that you should be doing if you want to be doing 4,000 calls a month and users just aren't using the technology? Understanding what's limiting use of the technology. We were talking earlier, there's a conference room in our office that no one uses because it's too hot. There's another one that people might use because it has a great view out the window. So that becomes more of a value-based ROI on are you getting the utilization out of your investment versus support-based metrics. So I think SLAs are shifting more towards value-based metrics.
And the second part of your question, if I heard it correctly, was, AV as a service, and I'm going to give you an example that I think equates to that, which is, we had a customer that wanted a room type A, B, and C, and they wanted to pay a monthly fee for that room. And the challenge with that, we ended up doing it, but we had to partner with someone who was willing to hold the paper on all that equipment. And that's really the challenge of that. It's not like a cell phone where you got, one little device. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of devices. So in that case, I think we partnered with AT&T. I don't know if you remember that one. And so it's $15,000 a month for a room A, or whatever. And it included a refresh every 2 years. And I love the model. I think people would like the model. It's just no one has the cash to carry that infrastructure. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting if you go back and look at what is driving that, and that is the move from AV being the purview of a facilities team, but it's now become under the purview of an IT team who is absolutely used to leasing a laptop or doing a subscription fee for a cell phone per user, moving now to the cloud where everything is a turnkey, quote unquote, managed service. Now they're looking at AV as part of that commodity play to say, just charge me $300 a month for the room and maintain it, update it, and make sure it always works for me.
Any other questions? All right, well, I think you get a couple extra minutes to your day. Thank you for attending, we appreciate it, and please, if you're not a member of IMCCA, stop down at the booth, sign up, it's free for end users. Thank you. Thanks, guys.